In the underworld of organized crime, few names carry as much weight as Lou Malo Roy. A key figure in the Hells Angels, Roy became one of Quebec's most influential and wealthy criminals. His rise to power, however, made him many enemies, both within and outside the club. On June 23, 2000, Roy disappeared without a trace, sparking a wave of speculation that persists today. Was it a betrayal, a power struggle, or something even darker? In this video, we delve into the mysterious disappearance of Louis Roy, a story filled with danger, intrigue, and chilling details that will make you question what really happened. Stay tuned to uncover the truth. Louis Roy wasn't just another Hells Angels member. He was a major player in the criminal world. Rising through the ranks, he became one of the wealthiest and most influential members of the organization. Born in the late 1950s, Roy was known for his sharp business acumen, particularly in the drug trade. He wasn't involved in the street-level operations, but was deeply embedded in the Hells Angels network, participating in some of the most lucrative and dangerous criminal activities. Roy's prominence grew through his involvement in drug trafficking, particularly cocaine. By the late 1990s, the Hells Angels had already cemented their dominance in Quebec's underworld, controlling significant portions of the drug trade. While this made them a prime target for rivals, it also granted them immense power and wealth. With his business-savvy mind, Roy quickly became one of the wealthiest figures in the club. He wasn't just a foot soldier. He was a key player, mingling with the most powerful figures in the criminal world. Roy was also a key member of the Hells Angels Nomads chapter, a select group that operated across Canada. The Nomads weren't just part of the Hells Angels. They were considered the elite, trusted with handling sensitive operations. Roy's status within this group was indisputable, giving him significant influence. However, as Roy's power grew, so did his enemies. His involvement in the cocaine trade, in particular, didn't sit well with everyone, including Maurice "Mom" Boucher, the head of the Hells Angels in Quebec. Despite the trouble surrounding him, Roy believed his position as a founding member of the Nomads chapter gave him immunity. But the criminal world is far from forgiving, and Roy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. To fully grasp the significance of Louis Roy's life and actions, it's crucial to understand the Hells Angels' role in Quebec. Originally founded in California in 1948, the Hells Angels expanded internationally, setting their sights on Quebec by the late 1970s. By then, they had established a stranglehold on the province's criminal scene, particularly in drug trafficking, extortion, and even murder. Montreal became their stronghold, and from there, they controlled vast operations spanning across Canada and into the United States. That be why the time Roy became involved with the Hells Angels, they were already a dominant force. However, they faced fierce competition from rival gangs, most notably the Rock Machine, with whom they waged a brutal war for control of Quebec's drug trade. At the center of this conflict were figures like Roy and Boucher, the ruthless leader of the Hells Angels in Quebec. Boucher's leadership was defined by his willingness to do whatever it took to maintain control, including murder, intimidation, and manipulation. Loyalty to the club was paramount to Boucher, and anyone who defied him was considered a threat. That Roy's role within the Hells Angels was tied to his involvement in the cocaine business, as the gang was notorious for controlling the illegal drug trade, including cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. In Quebec, however, cocaine was where the real money was. Roy's success in the business made him one of the wealthiest members of the gang, if not the wealthiest in the province. But it wasn't just his wealth that made him valuable. It was his connections and his ability to get things done. Roy's rise to power wasn't without its challenges. While he had the loyalty of many members, he also made enemies within the club. One of these enemies was Maurice Boucher, the man who would ultimately orchestrate Roy's disappearance. At the heart of their conflict was Roy's approach to drug pricing. Unlike other members of the Hells Angels who adhered to the strict pricing structure set by Boucher, Roy had a tendency to undercut the cost of cocaine. Selling it for less than the standard $50,000 per kilogram angered Boucher and the Mafia, particularly the Rizzuto family, who had strong ties with the Hells Angels. This behavior didn't sit well with those who valued order and loyalty, especially in such a competitive and dangerous world. The issue between Roy and Boucher wasn't just about money. The Hells Angels were in a brutal war with the Rock Machine and needed to maintain smooth, profitable operations. Undercutting prices was seen as a direct challenge to their efforts and a threat to their dominance. In the criminal underworld, the price of cocaine wasn't just a financial figure. It was a symbol of power and control. Despite these growing tensions, Roy wasn't someone who could be easily intimidated. His confidence stemmed from his high position within the club and his belief that as a founding member of the Nomads chapter, he was untouchable. However, Roy was about to learn that even the most powerful figures in the underworld weren't immune to betrayal. The rules of the game were changing, and he would soon find out just how dangerous it was to step out of line. As Roy's influence continued to grow, so did the animosity between him and Maurice Boucher, the ruthless leader of the Hells Angels in Quebec. Boucher, known for his cruelty and iron-fisted leadership, didn't tolerate dissent. Roy's failure to follow the rules, particularly in how he handled the drug trade, became a major point of contention. Roy's tendency to undercut cocaine prices, selling it for less than the agreed price, was not only a financial loss but also a direct challenge to Boucher's authority. For Boucher, who had worked hard to establish a rigid hierarchy, this was seen as an insult to the order he had painstakingly built. That Roy's actions angered not only Boucher, but also powerful Mafia figures who had deep ties with the Hells Angels, including the Rizzuto family. In the criminal world, loyalty to your superiors was everything, and Roy's pricing decisions were starting to rub the wrong people the wrong way. Boucher, known for his unforgiving nature, saw Roy's actions as a direct threat to his leadership and wasn't about to let it slide. What made matters worse was Roy's refusal to join Boucher's inner circle. While Roy valued his independence, Boucher saw this as a sign of disrespect and disloyalty. As tensions escalated, the divide between the two men became even more apparent. Roy's growing influence in the cocaine trade, combined with his defiance of Boucher's rules, made him a target in the brutal world of the Hells Angels. In this cutthroat environment, betrayal was often met with death, and it was only a matter of time before Roy's actions caught up with him. And on June 23, 2000, Lou Roy's disappearance marked a dark day in the history of the Hells Angels in Quebec. He had been attending a party at the home of Maurice Boucher's father, and in the blink of an eye, he vanished. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance immediately sparked suspicions, and rumors began to spread. For those who knew Roy, the idea of him simply disappearing without a trace seemed unfathomable. Given his high profile within the Hells Angels, it was hard to believe he would just vanish. But the truth behind his disappearance was far darker and more complex than anyone had imagined. Sinister than anyone could have imagined, it didn't take long for people to connect the dots between Roy's disappearance and the growing conflict with Bowie. It became clear that Roy's fate had likely been sealed long before that fateful evening at the party. It's believed that Roy was lured into a trap. Some say he was tricked into believing that the gathering was a peaceful family event. But it was anything but the reality was that he was walking straight into the hands of those who had decided his time had come. There are multiple theories about what exactly happened next, but the one that has gained the most traction suggests that Roy was taken to a meat processing plant. It was here that his life would come to a brutal end. The theory of his murder at the meat plant became widely accepted when sources close to the Hells Angels and Mafia began to speak out. One of the most chilling revelations came from Andrea Scappa, a former member of the Mafia, who claimed that Roy was killed in a way that was both gruesome and symbolic. According to Ska, Roy's body was dismembered and disposed of in a manner that left no trace. It was said that Roy was run through a meat grinder. Despite the gruesome nature of the story, it painted a picture of just how far the Hells Angels and their allies in the Mafia would go to eliminate anyone they saw as a threat. It was a message to anyone who might think they could defy the organization and live to tell the tale. Roy's death was not just about revenge for underpricing drugs or disrespecting Bauer. It was a cold reminder. Betrayal is often met with the most brutal consequences. Roy's body was never found, and to this day the exact details of his death remain unclear. Some believe the story of the meat grinder is nothing more than a rumor, but others argue that it's the brutal truth. What is certain, however, is that Roy's disappearance marked the end of a chapter in the Hells Angels story, a chapter filled with power, betrayal, and violence. So what really happened to Louis Roy that night? Was he truly Run through a meat grinder. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into the aftermath of his disappearance. And 11 are that in the criminal world explore how his death sent shock waves through the criminal world. The mystery of Roy's fate is still a topic of discussion today, but what it ultimately reveals about loyalty, power, and betrayal in the world of organized crime, escalating the disappearance of Lou Roy shook the very core of the Hells Angels in Quebec, but what followed was even more chilling. While many believed Roy was simply killed, the real horror came from the gruesome nature of his death, and the story behind it would send shockwaves through the underworld. Roy's murder wasn't just another hit in the world of organized crime, it was a brutal message. In the months following his disappearance, rumors began to spread. One history in particular became widely accepted that Roy had been killed in a meat processing plant and his body disposed of in a horrific manner. According to various sources close to the criminal world, Roy didn't just meet a violent death, he was literally run through a meat grinder. This wasn't some random rumor or exaggeration. Andrea Scappa, a former Mafia figure, later confirmed this in his book, claiming that Roy was indeed murdered in this gruesome fashion. Scappa explained that Roy's body was dismembered and processed like meat. Roy's disappearance left no trace behind, a chilling reminder of how thoroughly the Hells Angels and their Mafia ties ensured that his fate would remain a mystery. According to Scappa, it wasn't just about eliminating Roy. It was about sending a brutal, symbolic message to anyone who dared to defy the Hells Angels and their Mafia connections. The choice of a meat processing plant was no accident. It was meant to send a clear signal that betrayal would be dealt with in the most violent, dehumanizing way possible. The secrecy surrounding Roy's disappearance, combined with the method of his disposal, showed that this was not merely about revenge, but about ensuring no one else would dare challenge Boucher's authority. The terrifying story of the meat grinder painted a vivid picture of just how far the Hells Angels were willing to go to maintain their power. While some doubted the gruesome details, in the world of organized crime, such stories are rarely dismissed. The Hells Angels were notorious for their brutality, and Roy's death became a symbol of their unyielding nature. His murder sent a message to anyone contemplating crossing them, and the horrific details ensured that his fate would be remembered for years. Although Roy's body was never found, the details surrounding his death became a key piece of the puzzle. His violent end, coupled with the fact that he was never given a proper burial, added to the mystery of his disappearance. What was certain, however, was that Roy, once one of the Hells Angels' most powerful figures, was gone, and his death would leave a lasting scar on Quebec's criminal landscape. Roy's murder didn't just mark the end of his life. It signaled a dramatic shift in Quebec's criminal underworld that in the immediate aftermath of Roy's death, shockwaves rippled through both the Hells Angels and their Mafia allies. His brutal murder was a stark reminder of the ruthless nature of organized crime, and it heralded an unsettling period for those close to the Hells Angels. For Boucher, Roy's death was a clear message to anyone who might challenge his authority. His leadership, always marked by an iron fist, was solidified further by his ability to eliminate even powerful threats like Roy. Though Roy's death strengthened Boucher's grip on the club, it also sowed the seeds of a rift that would eventually lead to even more bloodshed. The power vacuum created by Roy's absence had a ripple effect within the Hells Angels and their dealings with the Mafia. Roy had played a crucial role in managing their drug operations, especially cocaine, and his murder left a void. Soon, rival factions within the Mafia began vying for control, leading to tensions that would contribute to the bloody Montreal Mafia War. For Roy's friends and allies within the Hells Angels, his murder was a stark reminder of the treacherous world they inhabited. Once a trusted figure, Roy's brutal death underscored that loyalty was everything in the criminal world. Even the most powerful figures weren't immune to betrayal, and Roy's end served as a deadly reminder of how dangerous it could be to cross the wrong people. Roy's death remains a defining moment in the history of the Hells Angels in Quebec. His disappearance continues to spark debates and speculation. Was his body truly disposed of in a meat grinder? Did the Mafia play a larger role in his death than originally believed? These questions remain unanswered, but what is clear is that Roy's life and death were intertwined with the dark, unforgiving world of organized crime. While the mystery of Lou Roy's murder may never be fully resolved, one thing is certain. His death left an indelible mark on Quebec's criminal landscape. It was a warning to anyone who thought they could defy the system, proving just how far the Hells Angels and the Mafia were willing to go to protect their power. Lou Roy's story continues to haunt the criminal world. His disappearance, murder, and the power struggles that followed, leaving a lasting legacy on both the Hells Angels and Quebec's criminal underground. Roy's murder sent a clear message. Betrayal in the underworld is met with ruthlessness. But it also sparked a wave of distrust and tension within the Hells Angels that would ripple through its ranks for years. After Roy's disappearance, the Nomads chapter he had helped build into one of Canada's most powerful began to fracture. Rival factions within the Hells Angels jockeyed for control, and the bloodshed that followed his death became part of a larger power struggle that plagued the club for years. Outside the Hells Angels, Roy's murder had far-reaching effects on the ties between the Hells Angels and the Mafia, especially the Rudo crime family. Roy had been instrumental in managing the cocaine trade for both groups, and his death left a significant power vacuum. This void was quickly filled by other players, leading to further chaos in the underworld. The once unbreakable alliance between the Hells Angels and the Mafia began to fray, with factions in both groups fighting for dominance. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of Roy's death is the mystery that continues to surround it. Despite years of investigations, his body was never found, and the true details of his murder remain shrouded in secrecy. Whether he was truly run through a meat grinder or disposed of in another gruesome manner remains a subject of speculation. Some still believe the Hells Angels and the Mafia covered up the crime to avoid further scandal, while others suspect there are even darker secrets behind the scenes. Lou Roy's life and death left an indelible mark on the world of organized crime. A man who built his empire through ruthlessness and cunning, Roy ultimately met his end through the very rules of loyalty and power that defined his life. His disappearance reshaped the Hells Angels in Quebec and the criminal world around him. Roy's story is a testament to the brutal, unforgiving nature of the criminal underworld, where power is everything and betrayal is never forgotten. It's a world where loyalty is constantly tested, and those who fail to uphold it often pay the ultimate price. While Roy may not be as well known as others in the world of organized crime, the impact of his life and death will continue to be felt for generations. His story is one of power, betrayal, and the harsh reality of life in the criminal world.